Welcome, everyone. My name is Melissa Johnson, and I'll be the moderator for this session. Before we begin, we have a few reminders. We do have a code of conduct that we will adhere to for this conference. The link is posted in chat. If you experience any issues related to conduct, please contact us via email at our GAIL conference support@googlegroups.com email. Your microphones are muted and the Q&A will take place at the end. Please do use the chat for any questions you have during the presentation. This session is being recorded. You can enable captions by clicking on the Show Captions button at the bottom of the screen. Today's presentation is leveraging generative AI to support neurodivergent and overburdened librarians, a path toward inclusivity and efficiency. And it's my extreme pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Ruthann Mowry. Ruthann is the curator of rare books and manuscripts at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. So please join me in welcoming Ruthann.
Hello. So I'm just going to jump right on in, and thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you today. We are going to start, there we go, with a quick roadmap of what we are going to be covering today. All right. Okay. So librarianship is a profession that is steeped in care for materials, for researchers, for public trust, and for the intellectual and cultural heritage housed in our institutions. However, that care can often come at a cost. Librarians are expected to perform a wide range of complex and emotionally demanding tasks, many of which fall outside of job descriptions. Library labor today demands the precision of a scholar, the responsiveness of a teacher, and the stamina of a machine. But few of us are given the tools to manage that complexity. Whether you're neurodivergent, stretched too thin, or simply operating in a broken system, the reality is we are all asked to do more with less. In recent years, this labor burden has intensified. Shrinking staff sizes, increased demand for public programming, expanded expectations around instruction, and the rise of virtual services have pushed many librarians, especially those in public-facing roles, towards burnout. The systemic pressures of academic environments, where service is often undervalued and invisible labor is pervasive, compound the problem. Moreover, existing support structures often assume a neurotypical linear mode of work that fails to account for the diversity of cognitive styles within the profession. This presentation explores how generative AI tools, while not a replacement for institutional reform, can offer meaningful support to overburdened librarians as well as those who identify as neurodivergent. This presentation covers the role of generative AI in supporting task management, instructional planning, and cognitive offloading within academic librarianship. These tools have the potential to alleviate workflow bottlenecks and mitigate cognitive burden, enabling librarians to focus their expertise on strategic and user-centered work. At the same time, AI is not neutral or an apolitical solution. Its integration into library and personal workflows must be approached critically, with attention to the ethical, social, and labor implications of its use. Rather than framing AI as a substitute for institutional reform, this presentation positions it as a provisional platform, one that can temporarily relieve structural strain while larger systemic inequities remain unaddressed. While my focus is on special collections librarianship, the issues raised here speak to challenges across academic libraries more broadly. The goal is not to endorse AI as a cure-all, but to explore how it might serve as a temporary scaffold for those navigating a system in which burnout is normalized, neurodivergence is overlooked, and support is scarce. In recent years, academic librarianship has undergone a quiet intensification of labor demands, particularly in special collections environments where the nature of public service is often both individualized and invisible. While librarians across academic libraries face expanding expectations, special collections roles frequently combine reference, instruction, outreach, exhibit work, and digital stewardship, each of which requires specialized expertise and preparation. These responsibilities are compounded by the physical and emotional labor of managing rare and fragile materials, often without sufficient staffing or institutional support. This presentation uses the term overburdened, not to signify general busyness or temporary strain, but rather as a condition produced by sustained structural neglect. This framing draws from an article by Stark, Albro, and Cuffroths in 2022. It's a study on academic librarian burnout, which found that systemic overload rather than individual failure was the driving factor behind widespread emotional exhaustion. Another article by Sheasley in 2022 notes that burnout among instructional librarians stems from unclear expectations and insufficient support, which leads to persistent strain. Within this environment, burnout becomes a chronic occupational condition. Burnout can be defined as the result of prolonged workplace stress, characterized by emotional exhaustion, depersonalization or cynicism, and a diminished sense of personal efficacy. In academic libraries, burnout frequently manifests in the erosion of motivation, the depletion of cognitive energy, and the internalization of systemic failure as personal inadequacy. Stark, Albro, and Kothroff also used the Copenhagen Burnout Inventory and found high levels of emotional exhaustion and disengagement among academic librarians, which was, of course, exacerbated by the pandemic-era conditions and a culture of overcommitment. This aligns with broader discussions in the LIS field around unacknowledged emotional labor, role ambiguity, and the normalization of burnout as a professional rite of passage. These conditions disproportionately impact those in public-facing roles where the expectation to perform highly individualized, resource-intensive service persists, even as institutional resources shrink. In these environments, additional challenges arise when institutional norms are misaligned with the needs of neurodivergent staff. The term neurodivergent refers to individuals whose cognitive functioning diverges from the perceived neurological norm. This includes, but is not limited to, autism spectrum conditions, ADHD, dyslexia, and sensory processing differences. Within library workplaces, neurodivergent employees may face compounding pressures when systems prioritize constant multitasking, rapid decision-making, or rigid communication expectations, which are conditions that create cognitive overload. Cognitive overload is the state of being unable to process and respond to demands due to excessive mental load. Cognitive overload impairs decision-making, delays task completion, and contributes to both emotional and intellectual fatigue. In special collections librarianship, this can occur when juggling multiple service modes, such as reference, instruction, exhibit work, and outreach, under unrelenting deadlines, frequent task shifting, and a lack of functional supports. At the same time, the rapid introduction of generative AI into higher education has opened new possibilities for task management, creative ideation, and administrative support. I'm sure all of you already know these things. Generative AI refers to machine learning systems capable of producing novel content based on human prompts, including text, images, and summaries. These tools have the potential to streamline certain tasks such as email composition, report generation, and instructional activity ideation. However, their effectiveness and appropriateness within libraries remains unevenly explored, and their adoption requires careful attention to ethical, labor, and access-related implications. These structural conditions do not impact all librarians in the same way. For those whose cognitive processing styles diverge from institutional norms, the consequences of systemic overburdening can be especially acute. These patterns of overwork are not simply the result of individual efficiency or lack of resilience. They are the product of institutional design. When administrative systems fail to account for the intensity of public services labor, the need for appropriate staffing levels, or treat visibility as a proxy for impact, workers are left navigating unsustainable environments with little formal recognition or relief. The issue then is not one of capacity, but of structure. While the structural burdens of academic librarianship are increasingly acknowledged, they are not experienced uniformly across the profession. Institutional expectations intersect with individual cognitive styles, positionalities, and labor contexts, resulting in differentiated impacts across the workforce. One critical but often under-examined dimension of this complexity is neurodivergence. Rather than treating neurodivergence as a personal limitation, which it is not, this presentation frames it as one of many in which labor systems interact with diverse cognitive styles and processing needs. Neurodivergent librarians may experience heightened stress in environments that privilege multitasking, constant task switching, unscheduled collaboration, ambiguous deadlines, or rapid response communication. This can lead to increased friction and decreased access to success, not because of individual deficiency, but due to a misalignment between system design and cognitive processing needs. These challenges are not inherent to neurodivergence, but are amplified by institutional systems that were not designed to accommodate non-normative working styles. Neurodivergent employees are often more vulnerable to moral injury in workplace settings where expectations are rigid, communication norms are unstated, and support is inconsistent. In such environments, the cumulative effect of structural friction can be both professionally and psychologically damaging. The compounding nature of this burden is also visible in personal accounts by Swick Jemison and Redden, both of them are in 2023, which document the lived experiences of librarians with ADHD navigating the complex demands of instruction, service, and collaboration. These narratives do not suggest that neurodivergent librarians are less capable, but rather that the systems in which they work often fail to recognize or support alternative forms of productivity and communication. When labor systems reward constant availability, penalize deviation from neurotypical norms, and obscure expectations, the result is not only individual strain, but structural inequity. Furthermore, the challenges faced by neurodivergent librarians often intersect with other identity-based and institutional factors, such as early career precarity, caregiving responsibilities, and racial or gender-based marginalization. In an article by Ford in 2023, drawing from Black feminist thought, it underscores how professional burnout cannot be disentangled from histories of systemic exclusion and devaluation. The historical exclusion of marginalized identities from full institutional participation continues to manifest in workload distribution, evaluation criteria, and expectations of availability. In special collections where the boundaries between service, scholarship, and identity are frequently blurred, the labor of navigating these intersections can be difficult. When understood through this lens, overburdened labor cannot be reduced to a matter of time management or personal wellness. Librarians are expected to be emotionally responsive, intellectually rigorous, and endlessly available to both patrons and colleagues. This is the product of structural design choices about what types of work are valued, who is expected to perform them, and under what conditions. This is not solely a neurodivergent issue. Any librarian without consistent executive bandwidth due to temporary overload, caregiving responsibilities, or compounding stressors may find these systems untenable. Systems must make space for variation, provide transparency, and recognize capacity as a moving target rather than a fixed trait. So this section outlines specific applications of generative AI tools used to mitigate administrative and cognitive burden for all librarians who may be struggling. The examples are drawn from my actual professional practice. These tools are not framed as solutions to systemic problems, but as provisional supports. They are tools that enable sustainable labor under structurally imperfect conditions. Their utility lies not in automation alone, but in how they externalize mental load, support task execution, and then preserve cognitive energy for strategic work. Generative AI can assist with executive function by structuring tasks and managing the mental workload. Tools such as Goblin tools and ChatGPT are used to break complex or abstract responsibilities such as event planning, coordinating instruction, or launching a public program into manageable and sequential steps. ChatGPT is frequently used to prompt action when tasks feel too large or amorphous to begin. For example, I was working on taking a public program featuring historical board game facsimiles that I had previously hosted in my library to several local high schools and then the public library. I have not done outreach inside a high school, and I asked ChatGPT to create a list of logistical questions that I would need answered by the school. It generated a list organized by topic that was rather thorough. Although I did need to edit and alter the checklist, it provided a solid first draft as well as some unexpected insights. One of the questions was whether I needed to be vetted by school security, which was not something that I had considered. Attending to the content of meetings like this one, while simultaneously taking detailed notes, presents a common cognitive challenge, particularly in virtual environments. As meetings lengthen, sustained attention becomes more difficult. In such cases, AI offers meaningful support, particularly in committee work where serving as secretary can hinder full participation. For example, Zoom's integrated AI companion can transcribe meetings in real time, which is happening in real time right now, enabling attendees to remain fully engaged without sacrificing documentation. However, the use of such tools requires careful attention to privacy and consent. All participants must be informed of AI usage and agree to its application for this purpose. Additionally, chat transcripts and recordings should be deleted once formal meeting minutes are created. While ethical considerations are going to be discussed later in this presentation, it is important to emphasize that tools like AI transcription serve as cognitive support, not replacements, that are valuable in professional environments where mental bandwidth is taxed by overlapping responsibilities and perpetual task lists. Email communication remains one of the most time-consuming and cognitively demanding tasks in librarianship, particularly when dealing with scheduling, donor relations, and instruction coordination. The emotional and cognitive load of email communication is often underestimated in academic settings. Librarians are expected to write quickly, diplomatically, and with expertise across multiple formats. Generative AI tools such as Claude, Copilot, and ChatGPT have been employed to generate first drafts of emails, rephrase content to be more tactful and professional, or summarize long exchanges. This supports not only efficiency, but also emotional regulation, particularly when the tone or the audience is high stakes or politically fraught. ChatGPT has become a primary tool for generating first drafts of emails, particularly those that need to be diplomatic or persuasive. So for this example, I used generative AI to develop a campaign of over 30 customized outreach emails, encouraging instructors to schedule instruction sessions earlier in the semester due to upcoming staff shortages. While the AI generated the core structure of the message, each email was then customized manually for tone, relevance, and then disciplinary alignment. This use of AI allowed for strategic outreach at scale, something that would have been prohibitively time-consuming without that assistance. One of the unique tools that Goblin Tools offers is the Judge, which can judge the tone of written text. This feature can be used to assess the tone of emails, internal communications, or public messaging before sending, offering a form of emotional support for professional correspondence and easing the emotional burden of difficult communication. This is especially beneficial in contexts where the demands of professional correspondence require sustained emotional labor, precise tone management, and quick turnaround. As with any AI tool that processes user-generated content, its use must be accompanied by attention to privacy and data sensitivity, particularly when handling workplace communications that may involve confidential or emotionally charged material. Primary source instruction often demands the rapid development of lesson plans and course objectives that align with unique materials or one-shot instruction requests that need a high level of customization. Instructors often request thematic sessions that align with evolving syllabi, requiring the librarian to locate, contextualize, and provide support for primary sources, which they may only have a rudimentary knowledge of. AI tools can be used to brainstorm possible instructional activities, generate discussion questions, or propose engagement strategies. For example, I taught a class on Arctic exploration using primary sources in the collection. ChatGPT was prompted to generate discussion questions geared towards the audience, which was creative writing undergraduate students. These questions were later edited and contextualized, but they provided a starting point during a week when multiple teaching obligations were due simultaneously. One recurring use for AI, that is my personal favorite, is brainstorming snazzy titles for projects, articles, and conference presentations. AI tools can generate endless options for titles that balance clarity with public appeal. When faced with high task volume, particularly when balancing reference, teaching prep, and other librarianship tasks, AI can serve as an external memory aid. Rather than replacing critical thinking, they function as mental placeholders, helping the librarian delegate low-level structure to preserve higher-order cognition. Tools like ChatGPT and Goblin tools have been used to generate simple action plans, prioritize tasks, and create timelines. This reduces the pressure to hold every moving part in working memory, which is particularly useful in weeks with overlapping deadlines. In one instance, Goblin Tools was used to deconstruct the preparation for a public program into clearly defined subtasks. The tool helped establish a realistic timeline with daily targets, reducing the need to manually construct a planner or toggle between calendars and fragmented notes. Similarly, ChatGPT was used to design a tailored system within Todoist, which is another app, for managing a complex task list. When existing methods proved insufficient, the model helped generate organizational buckets and a prioritization framework that continues to support daily workflow management. Tools like these highlight AA's potential to enhance time management and help librarians better understand how their workdays are structured and spent. However, such benefits often require the input of the personal or behavioral data, a decision that should be made with awareness of privacy implications. These types of AI-assisted systems offer value to neurodivergent professionals, caregivers, and those in hybrid or highly variable roles, all of whom face unique challenges in sustaining executive function and institutional constraints. While use is still relatively isolated in special collections, these examples suggest that generative AI, when used with intention and ethical awareness, can provide real relief for librarians navigating unsustainable workloads. It is not a replacement for institutional support, nor should it be used to justify increasing expectations. Rather, it is a form of strategic scaffolding, a way to redistribute energy back toward deep work, care work, and then patron-centered labor. All right. Generative AI may offer practical relief from administrative and cognitive burdens, but its implementation within academic and special libraries must be accompanied by serious ethical reflection. These tools are not neutral or universally beneficial. Their use has implications for labor, equity, privacy, and professional identity that extend beyond simple utility. One of the most pressing concerns is the potential for AI tools to normalize unsustainable labor conditions. By enabling librarians to, do more with less, generative AI may inadvertently support a culture of overextension rather than prompting structural reform. When AI tools are adopted without parallel institutional investment in staffing, capacity, or workflow design, they risk becoming a technological bandage over systemic injury. This is particularly salient in special collections where tasks such as teaching with rare materials, processing complex donor inquiries, or managing digital projects are often concentrated among just a small number of staff. If AI is framed primarily as a time-saving innovation, it may become a mechanism for offloading institutional responsibility back onto individual workers. As Ford and Preslova argue, the framing of workload as a personal challenge rather than a structural issue contributes to burnout and moral injury, particularly among those who are already navigating institutional marginality. Generative AI models are trained on large data sets, we know this, that reflect dominant linguistic, cultural, and epistemological norms. This has two important consequences. First, they often encode and reproduce bias, including gendered, racial, and ableist assumptions, both in content and tone. Second, they frequently mimic the superficial style of, professional and corporate communication while obscuring nuance, subjectivity, or critical perspective. One critical ethical concern is the phenomenon of AI hallucinations, in which the model produces output that appears plausible, but is factually incorrect or entirely fabricated. This is especially problematic in academic and public service contexts where accuracy and credibility are essential. AI hallucinations can result in misleading summaries, invented citations, or incorrect procedural recommendations, all of which carry professional risk. For librarians, such errors can compromise service quality and erode user trust. As such, AI outputs must be reviewed critically and treated as provisional rather than authoritative. The use of generative AI requires a high degree of information literacy, and any integration into library workflows should be accompanied by rigorous human oversight and verification. This can lead to the flattening of intellectual work, particularly in reference and instructional contexts where framing, tone, and context are essential. It also raises questions about authorship and accountability. Who's responsible for language generated by AI assistant? How do we maintain scholarly rigor when drafting becomes partially automated? While these tools can assist in tone and calibration, as with the judge feature from Goblin Tools, or draft generation, final review and ethical responsibility must remain with the human professional. Special collections work often involves sensitive information, donor negotiations, unpublished manuscripts, and restricted institutional documentation. Generative AI systems, especially those hosted externally, should not be used to process or summarize confidential content unless explicit data privacy protocols are in place. Even seemingly minor breaches of confidentiality can compromise trust and professional integrity. Just me personally, I adhere to internal guidelines to ensure no sensitive information is put into generative models, and I encourage all practitioners and users to develop shared norms of consent, anonymization, and discretion. Professional integrity is vital here. AI tools also reflect existing disparities in access to infrastructure and training. While some librarians may benefit from paid subscriptions or institutionally licensed tools, for example, my institution has a Copilot license, others may be limited to free or less secure options. This uneven access risks creating new forms of digital labor precarity in which those with fewer resources are left behind or expected to demonstrate AI proficiency without adequate support. If libraries intend to integrate AI tools into professional workflows, they must also invest in equitable access, training, and policy development to ensure these tools support, not stratify, the profession. The integration of generative AI into special collections librarianship is not a panacea, but a provisional strategy for sustaining labor under conditions of structural constraint. This presentation examined how tools like ChatGPT and Goblin tools can support librarians in managing administrative burden, mitigating executive overload, and reclaiming time for instruction, research, and patron engagement. These applications are most effective not as replacements for expertise, but as cognitive support, tools that enable librarians to preserve their bandwidth for complex, mission-aligned work. The key argument advanced here is that burnout and overburdening in academic libraries must be understood as structural conditions rather than individual shortcomings. Moreover, neurodivergent librarians are not inherently less suited to professional expectations. Rather, they, and many overburdened colleagues, operate in systems that fail to accommodate variation in cognition, capacity, and energy. AI can serve as support in these environments, particularly when used with transparency, ethical awareness, and professional discretion. However, it must not be used to rationalize deeper disinvestment in labor, staffing, or infrastructure. Future research and institutional planning must consider how to integrate AI in ways that promote equity rather than exacerbate precarity. This includes developing clear privacy protocols, establishing shared expectations around authorship and review, and ensuring that access to tools is not dependent on individual subscriptions or informal experimentation. Libraries must also invest in interdisciplinary conversations about how AI intersects with labor, justice, and care, especially in contexts like special collections, where workloads are labor intensive, highly variable, and often invisible to those outside of the department. The examples presented here are not definitive solutions. They are examples of what is possible when librarians are empowered to adapt new tools to existing challenges. Generative AI is not a turnkey solution, but a flexible environment, one that invites experimentation and reflection. Unlike static technologies, it requires intentional shaping by the user. It is a space to explore, adapt, and create new support systems, but one that demands ethical awareness and professional integrity. A nuanced and humane approach is both possible and necessary, one that uses AI not to accelerate unsustainable expectations, but to restore capacity, protect dignity, and make excellence sustainable. Thank you. This is all my citations. Thank you. I am going to stop sharing.
That was wonderful.
Thank you very much.
So you got a lot of love. I don't know if you saw when you were showing the slide about labor
They
ethics
very
and
nicely comment
justifying
on the post.
overwork. So that resonated with a lot of
Very nice.
attendees.
Thank you.
I liked also that you touched upon the idea that generative AI is not inherently neutral, because I think that there are many people that think that because it's machines, and it just doesn't work that way.
Nope, it does not.
So
Yes,
there were, go ahead, sorry.
I was just say I'm happy to share my slides. I can send them to you afterwards or however that goes.
Yes, I believe you can edit the session as the speaker and upload your slides.
Perfect.
So you had a few people had commented on Goblin tools. So I just wondered if you could speak more about your use of Goblin tools, and is it like a free paid version that you're using?
Yes. So Goblin Tools is I've been using them for a bit, so they've been around for a little bit, and it's the whole tool is specifically designed for people struggling with whatever variety of neurodivergence you have. The main thing, like when you Google, you go to Goblin Tools, is their magic to-do list. It's the one on my slide that had all the little peppers next to it, so that you can break it down depending upon how much neurospiciness you need for yours. And so it gives you a list of the tasks. So for my example, it was, what do I need to do for a public program? And so it lists it all out. And then each task you can then go, and if you need more help with, say it just says promote your event, and you're like, I don't know how to do that, you can go and you can click in and it'll give you more details for those. It also has other tools like the judge, like we showed, where it can like tell you how your tone is. I tried to make an informal one about the printer. It didn't go so well. But it can give you feedback on how your words are being interpreted, or most helpfully for me sometimes is how other people are trying, like what the tone from another person is to me, so that I can understand that a bit better. If you're using the website version, I don't pay for it. I just use the internet version. And then they also have other tools like Chef and Compiler and Estimator that'll help you with like how long a task will take. So that one is geared very specifically to neurodivergence rather than a generative AI model that's going to like write a whole draft of an email for you.
I will have to I've not used it, so I will have to check it out and see what it is. One of our conference moderators shared the Gen AI in libraries at gmail.com email as a place where you could share your slides, and then we could get them shared. So. Lots and lots of thank yous and how wonderful this was, and all loving all the resources. Very informational, well researched. One person also earlier had remarked upon how generative AI adds, which you touched upon, environmental and environmental racism concerns.
Yes, very much so. There's a lot to discuss when you're talking about the ethics of AI that unfortunately it would take more than the 30 minutes, but I watched a few presentations that were also happening over the course of the conference, and there's a lot of people doing a lot of really great work on AI and ethics in libraries.
I agree. I have lots of things to watch the recordings of on my list. One person commented that they loved how this talk was framed. Too often digital tools for accessibility are either limited to those with physical disability or framed that it must be specifically designed for this purpose. And what neurodivergent people need can also be helpful for others.
Yes, very much so. Yes.
And thanks. I think it's Cirrus for the cost on Google Play for the Goblin tools. Someone else remarked, Sometimes I wonder if we as a profession need to be more willing to fail, to say no, and to let things burn if they're going to burn. When we're being asked to do more with less, there has to be a breaking point somewhere. I also wonder if using AI to increase our capacity also helps contribute to the deprofessionalization of our work in the long term.
Mhm. I especially agree with that, which is why I tried to really drive home the point that this should be temporary band-aids, not this is how we're going to operate from now on. I can see institutions that are adopting AI in a more wholesale that just they expect you have an AI assistant in your pocket now, do more. And that's just not sustainable.
One of the attendees shared a link to a 2023 article from the library in the lead pipe about let no be no. So let's see, I'm just looking through all the comments. More again, thanks for your thoughtful approach and what can be helpful while still having to think about costs and minimizing risks. Let's see. Somebody said they once told their supervisor, we have to value our work, or why would anybody else? Let's see, there's a question. How have ethical considerations guided your own choices regarding which AI tools you use and how you use them? You mentioned this briefly, but I'm especially interested in this related to the environmental concerns related to using AI.
Mhm. Yes, in particular. Um, My personal choice is I draw the line with text. I do not use AI for image generation, and I do not use AI for video generation or audio with my voice. And this is just me. I also find it entirely too creepy that you can create an AI version of me and my voice, and it looks like that accurate. But those are just too far down the road of it's consuming too much energy, the environmental impact, and all of those things. So that is my personal line. So I will only do that. I also my institution carries a an enterprise version of Copilot, and the University of Illinois has a lot of really strong computing programs. And so I completely understand why other departments would need this. But their agreement is that Copilot does not use any data when you're using the institutional login, does not use any data for any training purposes. It's a confidential and secured thing. So for researchers who are doing like really intensive data work, you can use Copilot at my institution without that fear of data security. But personally, I am not a fan of Copilot, so I don't engage with it. Um, Also, ethically speaking, I do not engage with Gemini because Google. Also, Grok because Twitter or Meta. I'm saying things I'm sure we are all nodding with, right? So the choices that you're making in which AIs to use, I think you should also be thinking about like how do you feel about ethically supporting these companies and what they are potentially doing with your data. That was a very long-winded answer. Okay. But yeah.
That was a great answer.
Okay.
Someone else commented that systemic change must start with us. We must advocate for ourselves and our profession, in part by making our invisible work visible in any way we can.
Mhm. I second that.
Someone said they would love to see information on the environmental impact of smaller model tools, example, scribehow.com, Goblin tools versus the larger tools like ChatGPT.
Honestly, that's an excellent point. People are largely just looking at like the big ones. I do not know what the footprint for Goblin Tools is. But it uses a bit of a different system than like Gemini and Copilot and the big guys.
Be a future research project for someone.
Yes.
Uh, Someone commented, Copilot will not describe faces, even if explicitly instructed to do so. that makes it useless for much of the work that they're doing in creating alternate text and descriptions of their digital collection.
Yes, yeah. There's a lot of problems in that we'll call bucket. There's also been problems with AI failing to recognize anything other than white faces, especially men, like male white faces. There's also problems with the way AI talks to you. I don't feel like this is like entirely a library thing, but I read an article about the tone in which AI is speaking to people, and this one was specifically ChatGPT, and how it's promoting this idea of you are like this savior, and ChatGPT is using all of this really overly supportive and positive language, and it's really coming up with this problem of people are getting lost in these cycles of this chat GPT won't say anything negative about your work, even though it probably should be saying something negative about the work.
Let's see. The same person that commented about the small versus large, about individual use versus stock market traders and such as well. Someone else said they like the idea of bringing this back around to the choice of refusing AI that they saw in an earlier version. We have the right to say no and make boundaries and not just be swept away in the hype.
Mhm.
And someone else said that ChatGPT does do a good job describing faces, so they've been relying on that one. Someone else said that when you were talking about the tone and how it doesn't say negative things, that it's been described as ingratiating.
Yes, after I read that article, went to the settings on my chat GPT and told it specifically, do not be a hype person or a sycophant. So like it's a major concern that hopefully will be remedied.
Yeah, I heard in I think a different somewhere else that some changes were made, so hopefully it's not as bad as it was when it first came out. But um, let's see. I believe we've answered all the questions. So we have about 3 minutes left. So I didn't know if there were any other. Someone linked out to a resource for problems with facial recognition technology link, sharing a lot of great resources, courtesy thanks to you and our discussions we're having right now. So I just wanted to see if you had any final thoughts that maybe you wanted to share with the attendees.
Sure. Um, I've said it over and over again, and at the risk of being a broken record, neurodivergence and overburdened and burnout, the Venn diagram, the circles all overlap, right? But I'm really cautioning that AI is not the solution. It is, it should be temporary. It should be used on a personal decision-making level as to whether you're comfortable with this. And if we just say AI is going to solve all of our problems, it's going to completely obscure the real problems that we have right now that aren't being fixed. And just giving a librarian an AI assistant does not mean that I'm magically going to have the ability to take on more tasks. And in a profession that is already struggling with all of these things, AI should not be, let's not make it worse by saying it's more than what it is.
Well said. Um, so I think we're going to end just maybe a couple minutes early. So before you all go, I would like you all to give another huge round of applause to Ruthann,
Thanks.
or for their wonderful presentation. I learned so much. So thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today.
Of course, yes. Thank you. Thank you all for attending too. Hope it sheds some light.